You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 273.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? As always, I am excited to be here, and today with an interview with food writer Tessa Kiros. Tessa was born in London to a Greek-Cypriot father and a Finnish mother. She is an international best-selling author who developed an interest in food and travel from a very early age. Tessa grew up in South Africa and left home at 18 to travel and cook, working in restaurants in London, Sydney, Athens, and Mexico. Today on the podcast, Tessa and I talk about her 11th book, Now and Then, which is a reflection on a lifetime of cooking and eating. Now and Then is part memoir, part travel guide, part food odyssey, and a collection of more than 150 recipes that are accompanied by Tessa's reflections and food memories. Today on the podcast, we get a glimpse into what it was like to design Now and Then, which has a scrapbook type design, which you will very much enjoy. We talk also about the chapters and what the book actually contains. It's a little bit different than other cookbooks, and you're going to want to tune in and hear how Tessa made decisions about that. And also just about Tessa's genuine interest in people and kitchens, what they are cooking, and documenting that as she travels, shares meals, and basically enjoys watching other people cook. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Tessa Kiros. Hi, Tessa. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Thank you. Hi, Maggie. Lovely to be here.
I'm very excited that you're here. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I can't wait to dive in. We're going to talk all about you and your books and the beautiful work you're doing in the cookbook space. Before we get started, though, I'd love for you to tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Well, my name is Tessa Kiros, currently living in Tuscany, Italy. I'm half Finnish and half Greek-Cypriot. I like to think of myself as a cookbook writer, a traveler, and a collector of things that I love.
Yep. Wonderful. And I know that travel has had a huge influence in your life and in your cooking. So why don't you give everybody just a glimpse before we actually get into your book about the places you've lived and a little bit about what that means when you step into the kitchen.
Right. Well, I was born in London. My mom and dad met there. They were working there when they were young, born in London. When I was really young, they decided to go and live in South Africa. So they arrived in South Africa. We didn't know anybody there. And I think that must have been, quite exciting. We arrived in South Africa and went to several different schools. And I think that from just this upbringing, my dad having his Greek-Cypriot community that he was building up over there, my mom having a few Finnish friends, us being at different schools, you're immediately flung into all kinds of different and exciting things. And I think that people always look for a time of the year when they're making their certain foods. And it's a comforting thing for people to have when your family is not, your direct family is not there. So we would also travel a lot. We would go to Greece for the summers and spend our time there and getting visitors, and visitors would bring things. So our food was always connected to these occasions, like my mom making her gravlax on Christmas Eve, celebrating Easter with Greek lamb, with lemon and oregano, and then all the things that people were bringing into our homes, which was exciting. So I think it's always punctuated important times of the year, whether it's Christmas, birthdays, and a mix and match of everything. So we grew up flexible and interested in other cuisines. And for me, that was always a really fascinating angle. And of course, the travel. That has always been my angle, the things that have interested me.
Yeah.
And of course, when I finished school, the first thing I wanted to do was travel. So I set off traveling and studying. I studied anthropology and sociology. So somehow it all came together into what I do today.
Yeah. And that's very, comes through loud and clear in this book, Now and Then, which is your newest book. But I know you've written some other books as well. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about the other cookbooks that you've written, maybe a little bit about them, and what makes your book that you wrote today different? And I think people then start to wonder, how is it that somebody can, write multiple cookbooks with different material, different topics, and different ways of weaving together stories about food and recipes about food?
Right. I think that when you to write a book, you need to have the inspiration and the material that interests you first in order to go forward and do the research, because the research is a lot. If you think about having to write a whole book, you need to really research a subject. So for me, it's about travel and people. So my cookbooks have largely been about travel. My first cookbook, called 12, was about my time in Italy. When I came to Tuscany, I didn't know that I would be living here for all the time. I had been working in the kitchen in London. I'd been working in Greece. I'd been on my travels in Mexico, New Orleans at that time. And I came to Italy primarily to study the food and the language and just everything. For me, it's the most exciting thing to arrive in a new place and be submerged in a new culture and a new way of doing things. And it's something that really, really lights me up. And when I'm inspired, I collect things and I keep them. And I feel that when you're inspired, then is when you can give something away to other people. Also, for me, the main reason that I would say I did my first book, 12, is that I wanted all the recipes in one place for me. Yep. And that is always my brief to myself, that the first copy is for me. So I say, how do I want to keep it? How do I want to see it in 10 years from now? How do I want to find it on the pages? So as close to that as I can get is what my brief is to myself. It's what I strive for. So in collecting my first book, 12, together, I don't think that I even set out to write a book. Although my mom says I did. She said she came into the room one day and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm writing a book." I think I was just collecting material and seeing where it went.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't imagine it in an actual hardcover book. But I said to her that I'm writing a book. And I think that I was writing it for myself to collect all those recipes, thinking, when I leave Tuscany, I want to have these things to refer to for myself. I want to be able to make these recipes in 5, 10, 20 years' time. And you think that you'll remember, but you don't always. So I wanted the exact proportions of what I had cooked with that nonna or Giovanni's mom, or the things that I had remembered that had made an impression on me. I think that's what most people do.
I think so too. I think that when people write a book or their first book, and I've heard other authors say that their cookbook, especially their first one, they were writing it to document what they were doing, and they wanted it for themselves. They wanted this collection of recipes, so they wrote the book to get this collection of recipes together. Yeah.
I think that many, many people do that.
Yeah.
Unless you're sent off on a mission to explore ice packing fish or something, that's a different thing altogether. And then there's research.
Yeah.
But then again, back to your question of how do you find so much material? Something has to resonate with you.
Yeah.
I think, it's a big process writing a book. So the more that you can resonate with the topic and the more that you can be interested in researching about the topic is, for me, I think, when it becomes almost not work. It just becomes something that you're doing and that you're so immersed in. It's like you've climbed into it and you're just enjoying it.
Right. And I think the resonance has to come first, because if it doesn't resonate, you will not want to immerse yourself in it. It won't be of any interest. And
well, I think that's a different kind of project.
Yeah.
And
right.
maybe some people are really good at that. It's just like a research, factual kind of, it's a different target. I think it's a different approach.
Yeah. But I think
not the way that I've approached. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think cookbooks have a potential and capacity to express emotion and to connect people through the written.
I do think so too, because I think that we all eat.
Yeah.
And it's such a primary, it's not an optional, it's such a primary function. And we all have to eat a couple of times a day, at least. And I think that it's wonderful to have some diversity. And it's not a singular, you cannot sit alone. You cannot cook if you're not inspired even. I mean, you can do it, but I find it really difficult.
Yeah.
If I'm not inspired, and if I don't have ingredients, it's okay. You can sometimes pull out, I have a recipe in my book, nothing in the house, spaghetti. But how many times can you do that? Generally, I think that we all cook coming from a place of inspiration, primarily. Even if you have 5 minutes, or we're all looking to give something good to ourselves, to the people that are at our table, our family.
Yep. And if you're lacking on the inspiration, then a lot of times it's maybe rely on the same things over and over.
That's
again.
good to have a good repertoire.
That's right. That's right.
Of recipes, but also to have a couple of tricks up your sleeve. And for me, inspiration is a big word. Yeah. It's a big part of it, because it's different. It's inspiration either for what you want to eat for yourself, or for what you want to improve yourself in cooking. Or it might be inspiration from people who have just come back from a trip and have brought you an ingredient, and you're inspired by one ingredient, or people.
Yeah.
Somewhere that you want to go, somewhere that you're reaching for, or somewhere that you're reaching back to bring up something from your memory and travel there again.
Yeah, I think people are a big part of it too, because if you're out in the world and someone maybe invites you to dinner, or you're eating with them, what they're interested in and what they like to cook, or what they share with you that they've cooked, can be very inspiring. And it might not even be something that I would have thought about doing before.
Exactly.
But they present it in a way that makes it inspiring to me, and then I want to learn more about it.
Exactly. And it can be like nothing difficult, as you say. It just might be like the way they put the egg on the plate, and you think, wow,
I never thought of that.
And I think this talking with people, conversing and exchanging notes is an incredible thing. And swapping recipes, and wherever you go, you can talk to anybody that you don't even know. Today I was waiting in the queue to get something at a doctor, and started chatting with a lady in front of me, and she started telling me how she makes her biscuits, and I was saying, well, do you use butter or oil in that? It's such an opening. Yeah. It's such a gift that you can give people. I feel that writing a cookbook is like giving people a gift.
And especially, like you mentioned, when you have someone expose you to a new ingredient, and there's something new in your pantry or in your cabinet or refrigerator that you're wanting to try and work it into what you're doing and talk about it. I think that's what makes this cookbook writing thing a little bit more, I almost use the word infinite. I'm not sure that it's exactly infinite, but
I think it is infinite. I really do.
Right.
And I mean, for me, then you can start again. You can come back to like the basics and start doing things that you thought you would never be interested in doing again, like children's, baby puree or something like that. We think we know everything, but we don't. And also because things are constantly evolving, whether it is ingredients or sustainability, new ways of eating. It's infinite, I think.
I think it is too.
When you're dealing with countries, for me, one of the incredible things about writing cookbook is how much you can learn from it.
Yeah.
And watching other people in different cultures. Now that I've been living in Italy, I know at what point they heat the olive oil up to with a clove of garlic in, and you sort of know how it should look before the tomatoes go in, and the color of the tomatoes. But for me, one of those exciting challenges is when you don't know anything about that. And it's so exciting to learn, to go and see, how does somebody on the other side of the world address how many chilies they put in? We're scared over here. We think we're not going to put too many chilies in. But in India, they're throwing handfuls of chilies in for a staff dinner.
Yeah.
And I'm watching and thinking, that is so courageous. And for me, it's a wonderful challenge. I want that personal challenge. I want to learn how to do that in different countries. And it could be a different thing at every different stage. But everybody, I think, has got their own little challenge at different times of their lives, whether it's learning how to make the perfect boiled egg, or how they cook in Mexico with those type of chilies, which initially is just, you can feel like you're blindfolded because you cannot understand anything. Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah. It's possible if someone from India was coming to your kitchen to learn to cook, or to learn about a dish, they'd think you're courageous for not putting handfuls of chilies in the dish, right?
Exactly.
And so
it is endless.
It is.
Then.
So what does
Tessa
do if she's not using handfuls of chilies? How does she make this dish or make something taste, whatever they might describe it as? Because I always think of this analogy, like if we took a ingredient, maybe let's just say strawberry preserves, and we got 20 cookbook authors in a room or in a conversation about, think of the 3 ways you would use that, we would get 60 different answers.
Definitely.
And that's right. It's one thing, and it's all these different interpretations of how to use it.
And I think that is really important, to literally just close your mind off when you're working and just say, what would I really want to do with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I want to use it?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because I think sometimes it's hard when we're creating to watch what's going on in the world around us. But I do think that's the one time we do kind of have to go. If we know we're working on a project, we kind of got to go into our little bubble and head to our kitchen and just
I always get into a
work.
Bubble. And it's that creative bubble, which is amazing. And that allows you to connect to yourself and be able to go inside over there and say, what is it that I want to give away? What is it that I really like? Yeah. Because sometimes it can get confusing. Yeah. And that's, of what you think you should like, and what if you're looking around at everybody. And I think that you need to close yourself off a bit and be honest with yourself.
Yeah, too much input is what I start to say. And I think I can feel it too. And when I get to that point, I'm like, okay, it's time to disconnect here a little bit and think about what I really want to do.
Yeah. And then come back out and ask for some feedback and say, because the feedback is important as well.
Yeah.
If you stayed on your own in a room and wrote a cookbook, I don't know. I like to come out with my family, and the more the merrier at that point, and taste the cake and say, what do you think? Like this, how do you feel? And then it bounces off you. You know what you really like.
And they'll be honest with you.
Important. It's really important. My family, in writing a cookbook, are my tasters and their friends. They come along and they taste. And I really value their honest opinions. I don't want everybody to say all the time, oh, it's amazing, everything.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not amazing. It's sometimes really not.
And you need to make it 5 times before you get it to how you want it to be. Yes. So the feedback of other people at that point is wonderful. Yeah. But if you think, hang on, I do really feel that I want to put pomegranate seeds on here because it's the way that I want to have it, then you go with that.
Mm-hmm. And then let the what's inside of you speak for the finishing of that recipe. Yeah, so I think so that's your story then of writing multiple books. I understand your first book. Tell us a little bit about 12, because that was a book that, obviously your first book, but it didn't end up being published in the way that you thought it was going to be published.
So we were saying that I was collecting all these recipes and started doing a book, and I didn't really know the route to take for it. So I went by instinct. Instinct is, I use a lot of instinct in the way that I go forward, and I think that it's important to trust yourself. And this for me was a big lesson. And I'm not saying that this is what everybody should do, but I just went forward, one foot in front of the other. And people are often overwhelmed. They say, how can you write a book? How can you write 11 books or something? I say, don't think about it like that. Think about, how would you start? one recipe. If it's a cookbook, start with collecting one recipe that you love. And if you love it, put it on a page. So, which is what I started doing. And I collected all the recipes that I wanted to keep. And I started putting the book together. So I didn't actually contact the publisher at that point. I did contact friends of mine, talented friends, and said, will you help me to get the book together? So there was my dear friend who became the stylist and illustrator of the books. And he even said to me at the beginning, what will I do on the book? I said, I don't know, but will you help me to get the book ready? And he said, sure. And he's been the stylist on all of my books. Super, super talented. He's not even a stylist. He found me a photographer who's also incredible, wonderful, has worked on all the books with me. And I called a friend of mine who is a designer, graphic artist, and advertising. And she said, I will take your book ready for printing for you. So I have this amazing group of people. We went ahead and did it. And suddenly the book was finished and ready for printing. And I contacted several publishing companies. So I did it like the wrong way around. And the book was ready, and I contacted publishing companies, many, many publishing companies, and they all said no. So I thought, what can I do now? The book is ready. The only thing I could think of doing was publishing it myself, printing it myself. So I did, and all of it was a process of finding out how it's done. We found a printer in Greece, and I printed 1,500 copies, which was probably quite ambitious. I don't think that I gave it much thought. Mm-hmm. I just did one step at a time. And I had two really young children at that point. But to me, it felt like the thing that should be done, because the choice was either leave all these pages flapping around everywhere and lose them, or keep them together bound in one spot. Yep. And I think that I really believed in the project, and I thought it was a great book to have. And I thought, my friends will love this. So we printed 1,500 copies, and then I went to the Frankfurt Book Fair a few months later with one copy under my arm. And even there, that was really difficult to get in to see people. They all said, have you got an appointment? What other books have you got? Are you a well-known author? And eventually I met Murdoch, and they gave me a chance. And they said, well, leave the book over here with us and we'll have a look at it. And if you could come back in a bit and collect it. And when I did, they were really interested and surprised, like, do you own the rights of this book? I said, yes, I own it all. So they were interested in taking that forward. And I know that is a wonderful story that sounds like it was easy. It wasn't so straightforward and so obvious what I needed to do, but that was my path, which I did, and I don't regret a minute of it. Yeah. And so it's not the path for everybody. And of course, things have changed, because that was quite a few years ago, 20-something years ago. And I know that it's a lot easier now to publish your own book.
Yeah, and but I always say you don't get the team of people working with you and for you for the distribution of the book. That's the part that I think makes the difference.
Yes, that really is. And you know what? You can't know it all.
No, I think we like to think we can know it all.
No, I think
that
it's important to know what you can and you cannot do. Yes. And you do not have to do it all.
Yeah.
I watch my children now when they're like starting to make dinners and that kind of thing. And I think, don't make things so hard for yourself. If I could give myself a piece of advice and go back a few years, I would say, you don't have to do it all. Choose people around you that are good at what they do, because I think that's the best thing that you can have, is surround yourself with a team of people who are great at what they do.
And you mentioned your stylist that has been with you through all of the books.
He's one of my best friends in the world.
Really good at what he does, right? Yeah. Good at what he does, yeah.
Yeah. And he's not even a stylist. He's an architect and interior designer. But brilliant eye. So choose people around you that you trust and that you love and that can take your vision to where it needs to be. So again, like you said, the distribution, that is a huge part of books, and leave it to the people who know how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't even tell you. I won't even tell you how I was distributing books. Right. I was like with a pram taking boxes of books to bookshops in Florence and saying, "Do you want to buy my book?" And they were looking at me like, "Are you nuts? You've arrived here with a pram and a box of books." Anyway, they took the books, and then I would walk back to the car with an empty pram.
Fill it up again and go somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's so I did. Yeah. It was just the thing that I did, because it's, you know, I thought this is what has to be done at the moment, and I did it. Didn't think, so there's no plan for it, but I did what had to be done, and it was great. But distribution is definitely left to people who know how to distribute.
Yeah, and I felt the same way about, well, everything. I had, you have someone else, you can edit the work, photography, design, layout. Do illustrations, all of that. And I think well, sorry, I just think for it allows the author to be the cook and the baker and the writer.
Mm. Look, I am involved in all of the stages.
Yeah.
Because I'm on the photographs I'm doing the cooking, and then the stylist, you know, they might be in my house and we'll do all the things together. We'll choose things together. Because I like to be, but that's not what everybody has to do. I think that you do what feels right for you, and of course, working as well with the publisher, you cannot always say this is what I'm going to do. That it's a teamwork.
Yes, it definitely is team. And then, you know, going from 12, your first book, to your current book, Now and Then, how many books in between?
Well, this one is 11 books published.
Yes.
One of them is a collection, and another one is in a pen. It's a accompaniment to my book on Venezia, but it's 11 books published.
Nice. And this one has a really like a scrapbook feel. And it's not, to me, it still does flow, like you mentioned, with what you said, chapters like What I Would Miss If I Left Italy. New Orleans.
Not a word of a lie.
Mexican flowers. A Few Things I Love Every Day. Thailand. The Ones That Got Away. So even if you just read the table of contents, it sounds very personal.
It is. It's the same kind of thing, a scrapbook, because it's collected in the way that I want to keep it. And I think this book is about what have I done up to here in my life? And I'm never just going to be one thing, I don't think. I'm not Italian, I'm not Greek, I'm not Finnish, I'm a mix of everything. So my book will be a mix of everything, and it will be what I want on my table today. So there's also a chapter on nowadays, which is vegetables, only vegetables. And that's, I've sort of very small introduction in that. This is where I'm going. This is, things are changing in the world. You need to look at what people's food tastes. You get somebody sitting at your table who cannot have flour, who doesn't eat meat. So we need to be open to everything. We need to be able to explore new ideas with cakes, different kinds of sugars. I feel that we need to be open. So for me, this book is an open book, and there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it is the way that I want to eat. A bit of a Thai dish, a memory from Mexico, and it is the way that we eat in our home. Yeah. We live in Italy, but not often will you see a pasta dish. Not, the Italians will have like lunch and dinner. They'll have a primo, a secondo, and then dinner as well. Primo, secondo will be a pasta or a rice dish. Over here, it pops up every now and then. So as the title is, Now and Then. Yes. And it's a little bit of sugar, a little bit of an ice cream, a bit of the chocolate, some soup, vegetables, a Greek dish, something from my mom's side that I feel reminds me of home. And I think that it's a way that a lot of people eat. How do you eat?
Oh yeah. I mean, for sure. It's not this. I mean, I like like I said, basic things that I do, but when we'll cook and try anything. So it's a variety of things. And it's not just, being from Kentucky. It's not just food from the South. With other regional things in the States, of course, other countries, food from, and with access to ingredients, it really does make it easier to venture out. And if you can't find it locally, of course, being able to source things online is huge.
Huge.
Yeah. So I think that's really what has changed that particular part of cooking, at least here for me, is just access to ingredients that, and that is makes it a wonderful thing. And I tend to be like I love to write things down and like keep track of things. Some people will like maybe take a picture with their phone. I tend to like write things in a notebook.
Yeah,
and,
I'm a writing in notebooks kind of person.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And when you keep track and you start to pay attention to what you're eating, to me, that's the best way to pay attention to what I'm eating or cooking. And mostly for me, it would be like what I'm cooking. I would just keep track. I would write it down. And then I find that's what forms the foundation of whatever the next project might be that I'm doing.
So it's a current interest that you've got. Yeah.
And if I want to explore something, certainly do that. And of course, with the work that I do, I get cookbooks mailed to me. So I do find that I try recipes that other people have created. In your book, I made the cornmeal cracker bread with the seeds in it.
And did you enjoy that?
That was lovely. Yeah, I've made it a couple times.
That's funny that you said that. I took out the ingredients today to make that. Yes. And I didn't manage. And I thought, okay, that's going to have to be tomorrow because it's something lovely to have in the tin as a snack.
Wonderful.
You see, that's a great example of things that we should be having nowadays because it's got all your seeds in it. And it's a great little salty snack that you can make really, beforehand and keep in a tin.
Yeah, really delicious.
And not difficult. It's not difficult. You need to spread it out really thin.
Yeah, you do, because you want it to, and if you don't spread it thin, you just need to let it continue to bake nice and brown. But yeah, it does need to be thin. The thinner, the better, because it gets more crispy and crunchy.
More crispy and
more brown.
And it needs a few of those salt flakes on the top that you can actually just get in your mouth.
So good. It's so good. Yeah, I've made it a couple times. And once I took it to my sister's house with my brother-in-law was like, where did this come from? I said, I made it. It's come from one of the cookbooks that I'm interviewing somebody for the podcast. And they loved it. But it's fun to take something like that somewhere and you can just leave it with them. They can
because it lasts long. Yeah. So you see, that recipe came into my house from my daughter's friend, Clara.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Clara's knackebrot, who got it from her Swedish friend, Stina.
Yeah.
And I think that recipes are swapped around. I 100%. Often describe myself as a recipe collector. It's one of those things that I'm always interested. When someone mentions something, my ears are always like, what? What did you say about that? Or it might just sound nice or have a nice title, but I want to go further with it. I want to know how they made it. How is it made? Or somebody brings something to your house. I'm like, oh, where is this from? And especially when it comes from a grandmother or an aunt or a different place. I'm always interested in these kind of things.
Yeah. I think you just touched on something that a lot of people, if they're diving into maybe thinking about writing a cookbook, it's hard for them to believe to be true about cookbook authors. Maybe if they have more than one cookbook, that I think it's not just our attraction to cooking. I think it's our attraction to recipes and collecting recipes and asking people questions about how they make things. I was with a friend over the weekend, someone new that I've met, and her husband they have a big farm. And one of the main things they grow in the summer is lima beans. And I'm like, lima beans? She's like, yeah, they just love lima beans. They love to freeze lima beans and have them on hand all winter long to eat lima beans. So then, of course, I had to say to her, well, what do you do with them when you make it? Yeah, do you boil them or she's like, so she told me step by step how she made her lima beans. But she says the trick is they just make like a basic like bechamel. She said, but you have to thin it out with save the water from the lima beans that you boil the lima beans in. And you have to use that in the sauce, and you don't want it too thick. Exactly. You want to make it thick, but then you want to thin it out so it's a nice thinnish sauce. It's not too gloppy or wallpaper pasty. It's nice and thin. So she was just, and she probably could have talked about that recipe for like 15 or 20 minutes. And for her, and for me, I'm just like hanging on every word. And she's like, why did you ask me about that? I said, because I love to know how people do stuff like that.
I love the details. I want all the details. I say, how do you cut them? And how do you, when I'm working on a book, I was in Portugal working on a Portuguese book, and I got into a taxi and he took us down to the beach. And as he was driving us to the sea, which must have been a half an hour drive, I asked him so many questions. Yeah. And at the end of it, he was like coughing and spluttering. And my husband said to me afterwards, you need to warn people. But I was saying to him, like, so what are you having for dinner tonight? And who's going to cook it? Yeah. And how many people will you be? How are you going to cook that fish? What are you serving it with? What will you be drinking with it? Where do you get the fish from? Have you
bought the fish already, or do you buy it on the way home? Do you have the ingredients on hand, or do you have to stop? Yes.
When people need to give you the details, and I often find that when they give you a recipe, so they might be giving you a recipe for grilled sardines, and then you get home and you make it, and you think, hang on, I didn't ask that. How long does it have to cook for? Or I want all those details. So often, if I'm getting a recipe from somebody like in Mexico, for me, it's fundamental to be able to cook with a person. I love it. I love nothing more than to be in somebody's kitchen in Mexico, in Italy, in a new place that I don't know, and watching.
Cooking them.
It's such an honor. Such an honor.
It is 100%. Especially if it's something they're known for and something people love to eat that they make, to stand there and watch them make it, it's just like you can't beat it. I ran into this lady later in the afternoon because we were at a group together and we had a little break. And I said, I forgot to ask you, what kind of milk do you use in lima beans? She said, I don't use milk. I use heavy cream. I'm like, okay, wait a minute.
I mean, that's like a fundamental,
So it's so funny. So I said, okay, so you make the sauce with heavy cream, like how much? So I had her give me the measurements, and then that's why she adds the lima bean sausage.
I know exactly what you do. Yeah.
And I said, what do you season with? She said, just salt and pepper. Anyway, it was great.
Some people don't give you their tricks, though. Some people.
I know, and it's funny, but sometimes I'll cook something and my mother-in-law will say, what did you season this with? And I'm like, olive oil, salt, and pepper. She's like, really? Is that it? I said, yeah, that's it. But it might have been roasted. So that roasting would add something to the potato or to the vegetable maybe that I roasted that,
Or some people might just throw in a handful of sage leaves and not think it's important to tell you.
Yeah, right.
Because for them, it's like just, outside in their garden, and that's what they do. And so you really need to go over it a few times, I think.
Right. And so this book, and the way that it has this scrapbook format, and it's from all these different like places that you wanted all these recipes together. It really, you can tell that you are after the details. And I think that's what makes your pecan recipe pie or your pecan pie recipe belong to you. Because the way that I would write it might be different. Right.
Exactly.
Even though it's pecan pie.
And even I find that, so if you are the author of a book, your responsibility is that everything has to go through you. You are the core of it. And for me, it's always a yes or a no. Mm-hmm. So this is a page. Does this deserve to be on this page? So I try and make it the best that I can through my filter. So even if somebody has given me a recipe and I make it and I think, hang on, I do need those sage leaves in, or I need a bigger tin size, or I'm going to add another handful of nuts. You can do that because that is your responsibility.
Yeah, because you're the one that's going to be going out, talking on podcasts, talking to people about the book. And it has to make sense to you, right?
It has to make sense to you. It has to make sense to you. And so for me, it goes through me. And sometimes you take a little bit of a license on that, an artistic license, and you think, I know that my book needs a little bit of cranberries in it, so I might just add a handful of cranberries in here, because that is, I feel, my job as a cookbook author, to give the finished package. So it's not just all one thing flat. I think it needs a bit of life in it. It needs a bit of variety and movement. So you can do that. You can edge out your chapters a little bit. You can But also what I love about this book, my new book, is that there's no structure to it. So some chapters have got like 30 recipes and another one has got 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Which, I believe that you should be able to have that artistic license.
What was the time,
things.
and what was the time space between the last book you published and this one?
Well, I think it was quite a few years. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And then this ends up being a book of things you've collected.
Things I've collected, things that I was working on now. I always think that it's definitely, people say, how long does a book take to make? I mean, I would say 2 years, but all of the time behind that,
sure,
that was, if it's my mother's lamb chops from when I was small, how do you give a time to that?
Right.
So it's things that were in your mind that you might have just added a handful of nuts to, or a blob of cream to, and changed it now. So how can you quantify that into how long it took it to write it? I think that writing a book is a creative process. It's not always the same for people. I think it depends on how people want to be involved in the book. And sometimes it's a recipe and a photo, or a recipe with no photo. But I think that is the wonderful thing about a cookbook, is that it can be whatever you want it to be. Illustrated, not illustrated. And some books which don't have one illustration happen to be my favorite. So it doesn't mean anything. And I think that it is so amazing to be able to have such a different variety with just words that can take you to a place, or a picture that can take you to a place.
Yeah. And that really comes through in your book, because if you think about a book like these recipes, and we know that the book can take you to a place, it can take you on an adventure, but there's a lot lost because it's a book. I don't get to smell anything. Unless I cook it, I don't get to taste anything. I don't really get to see the colors of any of the ingredients unless they're maybe portrayed in the book. But what you do something unique in your books then to help people kind of experience that before they even cook it. And I guess we might call it setting or something like that. And this book, with having the scrap, like it feels like a scrapbook. Tell us about the way that you use props and flowers and clippings and photographs and all those things that go into this book, because it's not just a photo of food and a recipe. There's so much. There's so much more. I think depth is the word I'm looking for this book. There's flatware,
and I think in the way that it's designed as well, which is again my incredible friend Lisa Greenberg, who is incredible in the way that she puts it together and she sets the scene. So I think that a word for me is integrity. That the more integrity that you can keep in the book, for me, is, the more it will hold together at the end of it, and the more it will feel connected together at the end of it. So if I'm writing the book, I'm the one that is, keeping track of all the recipes and how it's going. And I think the design of the book is really important. So you have to have some kind of a base on where to go to, and something to hold it together, a structure, which any designer that is working on will be doing the same thing on any book, is listening to what the thing is, what is the story that you're telling. So in my way, when I'm giving a recipe, and I've been in Thailand and I've got my team with me and my stylist with me, he's like, where did you eat this and how did you eat it? And sometimes I'll bring plates back with me, or we'll gather new things. And how do you want to give it to people as close as possible, often, to the actual way that I ate it? I think is a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just about me giving something to people who had nothing to start with. I think it's because people have that there to start with. They have something in their memory, a taste, their own stories. And if it resonates with them, that's amazing. A lot of people have said to me that my books have inspired them. And for me, that is a great, great compliment. It's one of the most amazing things that I can think, is that my book has inspired people. But I think it has inspired in them, their stories, their memories.
Right. It's not just necessarily inspiring them to be you or to cook just like you. It's inspiring them to take that step in their own life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is that connects us all. It connects us all because we all have a memory. We all have a desire. We all want inspiration. We all need inspiration. We all need to eat. We all need to cook. And I think that this is why this is such a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah. Same thing happens to me with gardens also. If I'm walking or I'm passing by or if I'm traveling, the way people arrange their gardens, the kind of flowers they choose, the things they use in their garden, it does the same thing for me outside that cooking does for me inside. And
you feel inspired.
100%. And I think, oh my gosh, that is the most beautiful color combination for the way that the flowers look. It's just, they're the plant choices. And maybe it's just a collection of native grasses, but I find it so inspiring. Yes.
People often say to me, what inspires you? And for me, it's definitely flowers and trees and specifically colors. And flowers, just their shape. Sometimes I can just sit and look at a flower and just say, this is incredible.
Isn't that amazing? The flower doesn't even have to put any thought into it.
Nothing. Nothing. Does. Whatever. Yeah. And even the way it goes, the other day there was storming over here and I was looking outside and my roses are still blossoming out over here. And I just thought, that is incredible. What shall I do? Shall I cut it and bring it inside in a vase, in a jar? And I thought, let me just let it do what it needs to do. And then I found some petals on the floor after the storm. And it's amazing the inspiration that you can find. And especially now that you say that color in flowers is one of my biggest inspiration.
I can see flowers in the book in different settings and different in the dishware that you choose, in the color. The color of this is the second book that I've had that has the pastel color pages recently.
I love it. Yeah.
Other than that, a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Rose Wild, who wrote the book. It's about baking with grains and botanicals. And she has different pastel colored paper for different chapters and pages. And you don't see that, like a pink page in a book.
It's nice, isn't it? I think color is incredibly inspiring, and it might not even be in nature. The other day I walked past and I stopped and I looked at a sign on the road and I said, that shade of pink. And I took a photo of it. And I just thought that, something that just, when something inspires you inside.
Right. And I think the other thing as cookbook writers that we need to do to be inspired is to slow down and pay attention to what we have going on around us. And that is where the inspiration starts to open up. And then once you start to see different things, it's like you can't stop seeing.
I think that observation is an important thing.
Yeah.
Really just, like you said, stopping, slowing down and being in the moment and watching the things that we often just take for granted because we're rushing past or rushing to do something. But if you just even think about going to a bakery in the morning, early in the morning, at a different time to when you normally go, and actually watch when the bakers come in and start so early in the morning. Yeah. And you go in with your senses. I think the senses are a big thing.
Well, the fact that they show up at 3 a.m, that alone inspires me. Just that is that's their routine. That's what they do. And they do that so that we can come in at 6:30. So I don't know, whatever it opens and get
without even thinking about it.
Exactly.
Come and have a coffee and a croissant. So
exactly.
Sometimes I love to go out in early mornings and watch things like that and really watch the process and smell and see and taste, our senses, use everything and just watch, observe. I find that observation is one of the biggest things, I think, for writing.
Yeah. And be, just sitting, it is just sitting and watching. And if something sparks your curiosity, again, carry that notebook and a pen and write it down. And
sometimes I'll be lying in bed at night and an idea comes to me. And, you just feel like lazy. You don't feel like getting up and writing it. And I'll say, just get up now and go and write that down. Because you think, I will remember tomorrow morning. You won't. Mm-mm. You get up and you write it down. At one point, I used to have years ago, now you can just do something on your phone. I used to have a little tiny tape recorder next to me. And I
Oh,
would
that's a
just
good
press
idea.
on and just like say, orange, napkin, checked, whatever. Because you think that you're going to remember it, but you're not. I won't. The next day, I think, what was it that I was supposed to remember? So I say to myself, just get up now and write it down, or keep a pen and paper next to your bed or your phone or a tape recorder or something. If you're in the car, how frustrating is it if you're driving and you need to stop and there's no pen or paper or something doesn't work? And so keep those kind of little things with you all the time. In my bag, I always have a small little tape measure, a small tape measure that is not heavy in my bag, because you never know when you're going to end up at some aunt of your husband and she's making a tray of something,
and
a dish of something, and you need to measure it, because they don't ever have measurements, these kind of people. In Italy, there is QB, quanto basta. When you say to them, how much of this do you put in? Everything's
That's
like,
what they say? Quanto
basta. See,
what does that
as much
mean?
as you need.
Oh.
As much as you need. Which, as a writer,
you're like, that doesn't help me any. I need to know. Tell me how much is in it. No quanto basta.
So they will maybe put like 1 cup, but I always often show up with my cup measure, my 250 ml cups and my teaspoons when I know that I'm going to be cooking with somebody, because it's incredibly frustrating to not be able to measure, or you'll end up measuring it then from your elbow to your wrist and think there's just too many things for you to remember when you get home. Yeah. So if you carry a little tape measure with you, always have a pen and a notebook. Then, you can make the recipes again, and then you'll add a little bit of a few cherries in or whatever you need to add in. But get the skeleton of it needs to get done properly. And that is what we do as cookbook writers. It's a big thing. People are buying ingredients from your recipe, and they might be inviting people to dinner, and the recipe needs to have worked, at least for you.
When I made the crackers, I had to gather my seeds. I'm like, okay, I know I've got most of these. Pumpkin seed, flax seed is the only one I couldn't find. Not that I couldn't find it at the supermarket, but I couldn't find it here at my house. And then sesame, something else.
Pumpkin seeds.
Pumpkin, yeah. And then I was cleaning out my pantry, doing some sorting, and I found the bag of flax seeds. So I'm like, okay, I've got all of it. And it's great. The seeds you can keep on hand, the cornmeal you have, the olive oil you have. It's great. It's a great cracker. So, hey, I say they should buy the book. There's a lot more than that, but that was really
not only crackers, guys.
Tons. I don't know how many recipes are in the book.
I think there's about 150.
Yeah. So let's talk about maybe a couple recipes that's what I tried. What comes to mind when you think of this book now and then, and you're trying to describe it to people? And we've talked a lot about recipes. I'd love for you to maybe mention a few recipes that really resonate with you, mean a lot to you, or it's totally worth it to get the book so people can try this. If you could narrow it down to a few.
I can tell you what comes to mind, like right now. I think there's something like my latest chicken souvlaki, which I've always got one thing or another kind of souvlaki. I like to make things which people can build their own things at the table. So whether it's last night I made the Mexican black beans, which I love, and comes from a chef that I worked with in London, for me, one of the most incredible chefs in the whole world, Angela Dwyer. And so last night I made that, and the tortillas, I thought, let me rather make the chapati, which is in another section. So you can definitely just make your own things, and you don't have to stick to the recipes exactly as they are. So I had an avocado. I didn't have feta or any other cheese. We didn't use it. If you don't have a lime, use a lemon or add your own thing into the recipe. So there's a wonderful sugar lemon tart, which I love in here. I also love to make my own ice cream. And sometimes people think I don't have an ice cream machine. You don't need it. You just whisk it by hand or find another way. There's a wonderful caramel sauce. What else do I love in the book? I love like a wild greens pie, which is in the nowadays section. And a vegetarian moussaka. So this is the Greek side coming in. In the Italian section, we have a giant tortello, which I made now with porcini, and that's like a really wonderful thing to make. We've got, I would say, from the Thai section, these wonderful skewers called mu ping, which are basted after they've been grilled and marinated with coconut. A mascarpone cake. There's a strawberry meringue, a frozen one, which is really easy to make beforehand. There really is like a big selection of things.
It's huge. It's a huge selection of things. And if you, there is. You could just thumb through the book, and if you love to cook and try things, you're going to find.
And some are easy.
They are right, exactly.
And then I've got something like a salmon bowl, which is healthy, grilled salmon with a handful of avocado, black rice, a handful of pomegranates, a bit of a soya dressing. It's really, I think, easy to have a little bit of whatever you need in this from this book for me. And I've actually been using it a lot lately. I have it open every day.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent thing when a cookbook author is using their book all the time and they pull it out. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, and I just thought this is so nice that I'm using it. I had that thought yesterday.
Yeah,
because it's not like, oh, I'm so bored of this. I want something new. This is literally how I'm eating these days.
Yeah. Excellent. Well,
and when you're cooking, you need to be not only thinking about what you are having, because when there's people around you, like at the moment, I have both of my daughters at home. Mm-hmm. Their friends come around.
No, sure.
My husband, Giovanni. So it's not just thinking, I just feel like eating mung beans today.
Right.
Which lately I love.
I saw the mung bean bowl.
That's wonderful. And I could eat that twice a week.
Yeah.
But my family, sometimes they'll want that. And then they'll say, okay, we want a hamburger. I've got a hamburger as well in the book with a tomato chutney, which is great. So I'm catering to different tastes. We have to remember different ages.
Yeah.
And where I am today is not necessarily where my 25 and 23-year-old daughter are.
Right.
So I try to take a holistic approach.
Yeah.
A bit of this, a bit of that, slide in a carrot salad here and there, a few mung beans, but also if somebody wants some grilled lamb chops and a cheesecake, that's also so okay.
Yeah, of course it is. And I think that's one of the benefits of doing a lot of cooking for ourselves is we get to create that balance.
Mm-hmm. And we do. And it's actually underestimated.
And I think our body actually sometimes drives that more than we realize based on just how we feel or what we might be inspired to try or to cook. It really is something that's fun to open yourself up to also is, having that breadth and depth with your cooking.
But I think that comes with experience. And I think it's a really good thing to have. And it's underestimated sometimes how important that is.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, let's not forget that we as cooks, as writers, but especially as cooks and home cooks, we want to put things on the table that people love.
Of course. Yeah.
Not just, oh no, and nourishing.
Yeah.
What is our job to do? But so important that people actually love your food and they appreciate it. Because you're spending a lot of time doing it. You've researched, you've done your list, you've organized yourself, and you really want people to feel nourished and also to feel, wow, we enjoyed that meal. Whether it can be the most simple thing.
It can be simple. 100%.
To something that you have actually put a lot more of yourself into.
Yeah.
So we are looking to give enjoy. It's a wonderful platform to be able to give people enjoyment and our experience that we have gathered over the years.
And I definitely think your book Now and Then is going to allow people to experience that.
I hope so. I mean, it's the best that you can hope for.
Yeah.
As a writer.
That's right.
And a cook.
That's right. That's right. So as we're starting to wrap up, I like to talk a little bit about books that have influenced you in your kitchen that other writers or cookbook authors have written or put together. So tell us a little bit about the books that have meant something for you in your kitchen.
Well, I love a book, something like Laurie Colwin, Home Cooking. I love the way that it's written. just words that
Yeah.
can take you to a place so cleverly and can take you on a journey in your mind to somebody's kitchen and to be able to want what they are describing without a picture, without a photo or anything. And I'm really inspired, totally inspired by that kind of writing.
And that book was published maybe in the 80s. So, and there is no photos in it, and there is no, I don't even think there's illustrations. But it's an amazing book. Amazing.
A couple of drawings. It's incredible, and it's one that I go back to. It's an easy one to read, an easy one to hold, and you can just open anywhere and be taken to a moment in time. I find it really inspiring.
It is. It's a beautiful little book.
And another book that I love is something, and I love it for the title, Roast Chicken and Other Stories.
Oh, never. Don't know if I've heard of
Simon
this
Hopkinson. One. Just love also little arranged in things like this: anchovies, little chaplain anchovies, chocolate. I love that. And I love the title.
Yes. Roast Chicken and Other Stories. I'll link to both of those in the show notes.
That's a book that I've had for ages, and I sometimes just open it and it just makes me happy.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing those.
Simon
it's always
Hopkinson,
nice.
Right? Yeah. I think
is that, yeah. I think you're right.
Beautiful. Sometimes you just like something for what it is. It's just even the title of that, the simplicity of that. It doesn't always have to be like, it can just be like a tiny little thing that just says yes to you.
Yes.
Why do you like that? I don't know, but it just takes me somewhere. It inspires me. It fulfills me.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I'll link to both of those for everyone in the show notes. So, and wrapping up here, we'd love to have you tell everyone the best way to connect with you online.
Well, I have Instagram, and it's Tessa Kiros, at Tessa Kiros.
Perfect.
And I think that's the one that I use. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, Tessa. All about
it's been such a pleasure, really.
Cookbooks, inspiration, observation, and all the things that I think go into making a cookbook very not just it's recipes, but yours is more than that. And I think if anyone buys the book, they'll understand what I mean by that. And congratulations to Lisa Greenberg, your stylist, who helped you get this vision on paper. It's a gorgeous book. And
Lisa Greenberg is the artist, the designer, and Mikhail Touros is my friend who is the stylist.
Oh, the stylist. So it's two different people.
Yeah. Two different people. And Manos is the photographer. So we have a team of 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. You all did a beautiful job. And it takes a team. It really does to put a book.
It does. It takes a team. And I think that you really touched on some amazing stuff today. I loved talking with you about this. It was really, really beautiful talking to you.
Yeah.
And you really brought out some really important points, I think.
Yeah. And I think that when you get books like this and that Tessa has written and a cookbook author has written, where you know that their kitchen experience and what they love and what they do in their kitchen is just at the heart of this book, it just oozes out of it. I mean, I don't think it's from, well, I mean, cookbooks, obviously, I love the whole genre of it. And I've written my own. I'm not really sure what it is. I can just tell. Although, the flip side of that, I could get a little collection of recipes. I have one up on my, we have a little bar area upstairs. Kentucky, as you know, is known for bourbon. And my mother passed away in February, and we got to go through her books. And my father, it's also my father's books as well. But this little teeny book all about the mint julep, which is one cocktail that they serve for the Kentucky Derby. So it's very small. There's maybe 20 different little variations, stories about it. It's kind of an older book, but it's the most beautiful little book. And it's so not the same as yours, but still very inspiring.
I know
it talks about
mean.
The importance of the water and the ice and the type of vessel you put it in and how the mint needs to be fresh and the certain time of year in Kentucky when it's the freshest. So it's just,
Something that you can relate to on some level.
Exactly.
And who knows why inspires you. You don't even know why.
I don't even know why. Right.
But it's when it touches a place in you and you know it.
Right. And I have to believe that it's because the person that wrote it was touched in the inside in that same place when they were working on the project. And it's transmitted through the book.
I always think that if you collect things and put them into a book in the way that you love, somebody else is going to love those as well.
Yes. 100%.
So I always say to people, start off with things that you love and put those down. What else should you do? For me, that's what it is.
Yeah. And this
things that I love and want to keep.
Exactly. And now you get to cook out of your own book. What a great thing to be able to.
That is really. So I think that, something that you want to keep on, if you are working on a book, make things that you want to be able to refer to in the future. In 10 years' time, you've got a ragu in that book. You want to make that ragu. It's there.
Yeah.
It's like a photo album like a snapshot.
It is like a photo album. Yeah.
And if you can make it be timeless.
It truly is. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of your conversation today. It was very enjoyable. And I wish you nothing but the best with your book now and then.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.